Today we're talking about mixing your own vocals, and I'm going to show you my go-to mix that I'm using as a base for almost everything I do. Over the time that I've been creating covers for YouTube, I've sort of found my own go-to mix that works for me, and I'll show you how you can get a pop sounding mix for your vocals, for your covers. We will not be talking about heavy stuff. We won't be talking about how to set up your place for the best recording or like microphone angles. We won't be touching on automation and that kind of more heavy stuff. I'll just be showing you how you can do a good, decent pop mix using simple tools that exist in most DAWs. And by DAW, I mean Digital Audio Workstation. If you want to know how I take a dry vocal take like this,
I just can't imagine how you could be so okay now that I'm gone.
and turn it into this,
And I just can't imagine how you could be so okay now that I'm gone.
keep watching. So the first thing I do is a round of surgical EQ. EQ or equalizer is where you tweak the different frequencies in your vocal take to make it sound the way you want. So you can fix muddiness, you can make it sound warmer, colder, more crisp, more boxy. You can make it more nasal or less nasal. I don't know what you're into. It depends on your sound, but generally in pop, you want a top and heavy mix with a lot of shimmer and sparkle, you know? It's a way to clear up the sound and make it sound the way you want. Surgical EQ is mostly about cutting away the frequencies that you don't want. I like to just remove everything below 50 hertz because my voice doesn't really do much there. It's mostly like room sounds like and you don't want that. And if there's any muddiness and stuff, I try to cut that out, you know? But just remember, EQ will never fix a bad vocal take. That shit can be there. The second thing I add is a de-esser. A de-esser is used to reduce the loudness of frequencies in sibilance, like S's and T's and ch and j and stuff like that. The sounds that can be like spitting or piercing to your ears. It's almost like you're adding a compressor just for them. So whenever those sounds are above the threshold, they're lowered. You don't want to go overboard with your de-esser and make it sound like an unnatural lisp. It's almost like this. I like to reduce by 2 to 3 decibels above -15, and I like to have the filter on the frequencies around 6,000 to 7,000 hertz because that's where my sibilants are the most prominent. You just have to watch the chart and see where it peaks for you and just choose that to be where the filter kicks in. And then I like to have 2 to 3 decibels reduction depending, and I try not to keep the release time too long. I want the sounds to be there, I just want them to be a little bit less, you know? Now it's time for the first compressor, and yes, I use two, and I'll get into it. A compressor is a tool to help add more dynamic control to a take or to vocals, and it can also help shape and enhance the tone of the vocal. In pop-type genres, a heavy use of processing is not only acceptable, it's almost required. They want it to pop. You want highly consistent dynamics and lots of top-end shimmer. So for the first compressor, I like to shape the tone. I call it a tonal compressor, or they call it, it's not my invention. I set the threshold to around -24, and I use the ratio 1:1 with a soft knee. I set my attack time to 15 milliseconds and my release time to around 40 milliseconds. But you have to play around with it. You know, you can add a little bit more, a little bit less for more punch, whatever fits your sound and the song you're doing. And we'll get back to the second compressor in a sec, because now it's time for the second round of EQ. And this is where I sort of shape the tone more, get it to sound warmer and get that pop sounding top end really like crisp. But a good rule of thumb when you're EQing is try to cut before you boost. And by that I mean if you want like the top end to shine, try to cut more in the lower ends before you boost the top end. Try to never boost more than 5 decibels in any of the frequencies because you don't want it to sound too EQ'd. Subtle tweaks get you a long way, so don't overdo it. And again, EQ can never save a bad vocal take. It's time for the second compressor, which I use to control the dynamics of the vocal take, so it evens everything out and makes it sound more consistent. And that's what you want, especially in pop. You don't want any parts with annoyingly loud or silent parts, you know? Even if you got the dynamics, you want them to sound level, if that makes sense. Here I also set the threshold to -24, but the ratio is 20:1, and I use a hard knee. I use a shorter attack time, around 5 milliseconds, and then around 20 milliseconds release time. And I never set the makeup gain to more than 1 to 2 decibels on either of the compressors, but it depends. You have to tweak around, see what works for you. We're pretty much set at this point, but it still sounds very dry. Crisp and clear, yes, but dry. So to make it sound more wet, lube up, or like I'm actually in a resonant room, I use a reverb. A reverb adds the resonance you'd get by being in a room, like you can probably hear now because I'm using the phone microphone and I'm in a not soundproof room. So the reverb adds the resonance you'd get in a room, and with the reverb you can control how big that room sounds and also sort of where in the room you're placed. It just adds that wetness, it adds that oomph to the vocals. You can choose how long of a delay you want, how long the effect is sustained. You can choose how much of the effect you want in the mix and how loud you want it to be. You can choose which frequencies are sort of held and which are cut, and a lot more things. So my best suggestion here is you have to play around with it. I do that for every song. I never use a go-to mix here, but I just wanted to throw in the fact that I use a reverb because, you know, it's nice. Just remember that nothing is set in stone on any of these points. You can always switch the order. You can play around with it as much as you want. This is just my base that I use and then start playing around with. So yeah, here's the list of tools and effects that I use in order. Surgical EQ, de-esser, first compressor to shape tone, second IQ to shape tone, second compressor to control dynamics, and reverb. Check out my cover of Driver's License here. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you.